Hello everybody, this is Dr. Cook. Welcome to week 2 of our course. This video is going to address APA. I want to specifically look at the APA skills assessment and then once again review what you're submitting this week in terms of the planner for the upcoming critical analysis essay. So before we do anything, I want to look at the APA reference materials. So when you go into D2L, of course, it's going to be on the left-hand side under the APA tab. For the time being, you can skip over the formatting tutorials, although that will be important when it comes to writing the actual paper. But the two really important links are the reference pages and the embedded citations. So you'll need to understand those before you actually complete the APA skills assessment. Overall, there is also a color-coded guide which has multiple examples of some of the various forms that we're going to be using. In terms of the APA skills assessment, we tell you on the paper if it's a database article or if it's just an online article with or without DOI. That's kind of the important information that you really need to know. But I want to point out a couple things briefly from the references page information. So I'm going to move down to where we are looking. So the first thing you need to be clear on is the number of authors. And so we've listed here everything from a single author to 2 authors up to 21 or more authors. So you want to look at that carefully because when it gets time to the article that you're doing for the paper or for the APA skills assessment, you want to first kind of ascertain how many authors are there. And then that's the first section of the reference that you're going to put in there. You're then going to look specifically at the dates. So the rule is you're going to give as much information as is given. So if it's just the year, you're only going to put the year in. If they give you the year, the month, and the day, you're going to put that information in it as well. Perhaps there's no date. In this case, you can't leave it blank, but in this case you have to put parentheses, and in the middle of the parentheses you write N period D period for no date. This gives you a little bit of information of how you write the title and some of the ways to do the titles. Important is that you write a title as a sentence. In other words, only the first word is capitalized and everything else is small. The exception is, on this one, if you have punctuation in the middle, the first word after the punctuation is capitalized. So after you've gotten the author's name down, you have the date, you've written the title of the article, then you have to decide, okay, what type of source is this? And depending on the source, you're going to then write it in different ways. For instance, if it is a newspaper article, you are going to write it in italics. If it's a periodical or a journal, you're also going to write that in italics. If it's a website, however, you do not use italics. So that's really important that you also figure out then what is the source? Where is the thing coming from? Is it coming from a newspaper, from a journal? Is it coming from a website or a web page? These are lots of different examples of how you list page numbers. I would read through that on your own. But now comes the really deciding factor. You need to look carefully. Is there a DOI? And is there a URL? And depending on the answer to that question, it's going to make a difference in how you write it. So DOIs are always written in this format. It'll be https://doi.org//10 dot, and then you have your number. If there is no DOI, but it's from a website, then you use the full URL. So you have to look on the paper carefully. Is this coming from a website, or perhaps is coming from a database? If it is from a database, you do not write, and there's no DOI, you don't write anything else. You don't use a URL at all for this. This is a little bit different than what you may have learned in the past. Look carefully at the various examples. On the examples and in the reference guide, you're going to look for journal article with a DOI, or you're going to look for magazine article DOI, no DOI with a URL, no DOI with URL, newspaper article as well, and then you're looking for database with no DOI. So that's the first thing. You have to decide, all right, where is it from? Is it from a database or not? If it's from a database, does it have a URL? Does it have a DOI or not? And that's going to kind of determine how you're writing this. So you want to look at this really carefully. We have all of the various examples included here in this PowerPoint or on this web page, everything that you need to complete the skills assessment, APA skills assessment. There's also information about books and videos. Videos is going to be important because the paper that you are writing, I've given you a TED Talk. And so when deciding on TED Talk, you need to look at, is it a TED Talk from a YouTube video, or is it a TED Talk directly from TED's site? So go back to week 1 and look at the TED Med Talk. If it doesn't say YouTube anywhere, then you're going to choose this second version. If it is a YouTube video, it'll say YouTube on it, then you're going to write it a little bit differently by talking about YouTube. But this is the format that you would take when using these. So this is with a video from TED directly, and this one is from a YouTube. You still want to include video for each one. You still want to have the date. You still want to have the author's name. But if it is from a YouTube video, then it's probably from TED. And it'll say it at the bottom of this. So just look carefully. Is it YouTube or is it not? That's the first thing. If it's not YouTube, then you're going to go with example 1. If it is YouTube, you're going to go with example 2. So the APA skills assessment looks at the reference page first. So what you're going to do is you're going to format a reference page in proper APA format. And I'm going to pull that up right now and we can look at this together. So the actual directions and information that you need for the APA skills assessment is found in week 2. And then you want to look for APA skills assessment. And then go ahead and click the skills assessment. So let's look at the directions here. It says there's 2 parts to this assignment. For part 1, you will create a correctly formatted references page. For part 2, you will then correctly format embedded citations. So we haven't talked about embedded citations yet. We've only talked about what the citations are on the references page. Using the 4 articles below, create a correctly formatted APA references page. Now remember, on your references page, you do need to go in alphabetical order by last name of the author. When there is no author, then you use the title. And so look carefully at the rules on the APA references page. That will tell you how to go about this. So let's look at example number 1 together. I'm not going to do this one, but we can do something very similar. So right here they tell you whether or not it is a database article. So very clearly we know database. So if you were paying attention, we need to know basically one thing. Does it have a DOI or not? So you want to look at all of the information because this is the information that you're actually going to put on the references page. And if you look down here, we do see a DOI. All right, so that will tell you then, if you go back to database article with DOI, you're going to include the DOI in the actual reference and citation. Keeping in mind, don't forget we have the various names here. You always go with the first name that's listed. You always list the names exactly in the same order in which they're listed in the article. Don't alphabetize this or change it around. So in this case, Paula Tanabe is our first author. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different authors. So you'll then go back to the references page and look up for how would you write 5 authors. There's no need to include PhD or RN. In other words, this is a person that is a nurse but also has a PhD. You don't include titles, you just include the last name and the first initial. So I want to go over a similar example. We'll do one together so you can see how to go about it, and then you'll do the rest of this on your own. So the first one we're going to do is similar to what you have on your skills assessment. We're going to have an article from a journal and it has a DOI. So this is basically similar to what you'll see on the APA skills assessment. Journal, and here is our DOI. Okay, so now we want to format the references page. So the first thing I would recommend doing is going back to this web page here and looking for journal article with DOI. And if we scroll down, here we have it, a journal article with DOI. This is the information that you will need. You'll need the date, you'll need the title, you'll have to have the source, volume and issue number, page numbers, and your DOI. And here is our example. So let's kind of model our answer after this particular example. So I've already formatted our paper, so if you look at the formatting video, you will see how to format the references page. References is in bold. You have to have your page number, and now we're going to begin with the information. The first thing we're going to begin with is the author's last name and first initial. So the author's name is Jewel Albert, so we're going to then write first initial, period. The next thing, if you were to look at our example here, then we need the year. Now, the rule is if they give you more than just the year, you want to put that information. So we don't. We just have the year 2019. And the year then goes in parentheses. After the year, you definitely want to have a period. So I'm going to put our period. So let's look back at our example. What comes next? Well, it looks like the title comes next. And remember the rule, you write the title like a sentence. So I've written the title here. We do have punctuation, and the rule is after punctuation, you capitalize the first word. We don't need an extra period because it does end with a question mark, and that's good enough to end this title with a question mark. So after we have our title, we now have the name of the journal, and you'll see we have the volume and then the issue number. So the journal name is written in italics. You have a comma, and then you have your volume number also written in italics. Right after that, you have the issue number. There's no italics and it's written together. There's no space between the volume and the issue number. So let's write that now on our example. All right, so look at this. This is Journal of Religion, Spirituality, and Aging, Volume 31, issue number 3. Now remember, in your citation, you do not write VOL or spell out issue. So I've kind of written this out ahead of time. Journal of Religion, Spirituality, and Aging. This is all in italics. Note, again, the title itself of the article is not in italics. You only italicize the journal. You also then have a comma, and you have the volume number, which is also italicized, and then we have our issue number and a comma. Let's go back now and see what comes next. Now we have our page numbers. So let's look, and we have page numbers 255 to 268. All right, and we then also, after our page numbers, we're going to have a period, and lastly then we write our DOI. Let me put the period here, and the last part will be our DOI. So automatically when you write the DOI, you're going to write DOI all in capital letters, and then you have a colon afterwards. And then what standard is https://doi.org/10 and then a period. What comes now is the actual DOI number. So let's go back to the article itself. And this is the rest of the DOI that we want to copy. So I'm going to actually copy it from here. And I'm going to paste it onto our sheet. Now, there's a couple things you have to be careful of. When we paste, it does change the font. So you want to go back. You see how everything is Times New Roman 12, but when we put our cursor on top of what we copied, it's Helvetica 10. So you want to make sure that this is Times New Roman 12. Take out the space, and now we have it written in proper APA format. And let's look to make sure we have everything. So we have our author, we have the title, we have the journal, we have volume, issue, page numbers, and we have our DOI, and you note that everything after that, there's no punctuation. The only other thing is that this seems to look different. If you look at the difference between ours and go back again, this is what we call a hanging indent, and you want to make sure on your reference page you also use a hanging indent. So the easiest way to do it is to highlight this, right-click, go to paragraph, and then up here where it says special, we want to choose hanging. And now that has formatted this into a hanging indent so that it is proper. When you hit return and type the next one, it will also automatically be a hanging indent. Let me just move this for you to give you an example. So if you do it the first time, you don't have to do it any time after that. So this is how you go about this part of the APA skills assessment. Look carefully to see what type of source it is, and then go to your APA manual or to the web page here, find that particular source, and then put in the information. You can use this again as an example. Now I want to move on to the second part of that assignment, which is the embedded citations. So one last point about the references page. It could be that you do not see an author's name. So in this instance, if there's no author and you just have your title, you only put the title down. You're still going to write it like a sentence, but your title is going to go first because that's going to serve in the place of the author. So you would have your title name, Then you would have a period, you would have the date, period, and then the rest. In some instances, government agencies are considered the actual author. So if you're looking up a report and it's from the U.S. Department of Education, or the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the U.S. Department of Education, that would be the actual author's name. So even though there's not a particular person, it is a government agency and they serve as the author. So in this case, you would begin with U for United States. You capitalize everything in the government agency name, but wherever it would fit on the reference page is still in alphabetical order. So if you have a D, someone with the last name of Davis, then the United States Department of Education would come after the entry for Davis. So keep that in mind, that you might not always see an author, or you might see a government agency such as the U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. Department of Education, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The name of the agency then becomes the actual author, because in a way they're the ones that are authoring and making that report. All right, so let's move on to embedded citations. So in D2L, let's look just one more time very quickly at the APA skills assessment. Part 2, it says, using article number 1 above, show how you would format a citation when paraphrasing information. So basically, when you have parenthetical citations, that's the things that come within the parentheses after your quote. You have a couple choices to make. Number 1, you're still going to use the author's name. However, if you don't have an author, then you would use your government agency. If you don't have the government agency and it's just the title of a web page, then you would use the first 3 words of the title. That information is given in the actual citations, which we're going to look at on that web page. But you need to choose between direct quotes and indirect quotes. So let's look at this briefly. So you're always going to use a citation, whether it's in your own words or whether it's in the words of the author. So here's an example of where we had a DOI, we had an author's name and a title of an article. So if I'm quoting something from this, whether it is a direct quote or indirect quote, you have to use what we call a parenthetical citation. And that's what you're going to be using on the APA skills assessment. So you're only going to put the things that are in the parentheses. You don't have to write the sentence, just write the parenthetical citation. You always need 2 pieces of information at a minimum. If it is not a direct quote, you need the author's last name and you need the date. That's all you need. So in this case, if I were putting a quote in my own words from the Bergeson article, then I would put his last name, comma, space, and then the year. You don't need to put, in this case, the month or the date. That only goes on the reference page, but not in the parenthetical citation. You only use the author's last name and the year. There is something known as a narrative citation that is not part of the APA skills assessment, but it's sometimes good to lead up to it. So I could say, for instance, Bergeson 2019 claims that, and then I would rewrite or paraphrase the original quote. So we're only looking in the section for parenthetical citations. So we're only going to do things that are within the parentheses. Keep in mind, since it is the end of the sentence, you are going to put a period afterwards. You can do that on the APA skills assessment. It won't matter. I won't take off for it, but normally you would put a period. So again, you need to decide. If there's no author, this shows you how to do it. No author, you use the first 3 words of the of the article, such as the newest immigration, you would use parentheses. The comma goes within the parentheses. Multiple authors, this is how you would write it. If you have 3 or more authors, you don't write all 3 names down. You simply write the first name, and then you use what we call et al. There's a period and a comma, and then the year. All right, video source, etc. So this will give you enough information. Now, if you have a direct quote, you have to use one more piece of information. Direct quotes still use the author's last name, they still use the year, but you then have to put the page number or the paragraph number. So you have to look at your source. If there's a page number, you write P, period, and then the number. If it is a paragraph numbers, let's say there's no page numbers, it's on a web page with no page numbers, then you actually have to count the paragraphs, and you write PARA and then 15. So going back to our skills assessment, it will tell you whether or not you are going to have a direct quote or not. So we have paraphrasing, direct quote. They give you the paragraph number, all right? Paraphrasing information. So when it says article number 1, we actually mean article number 1. That would be this article, not as it appears on the reference page, because the reference page, this article number 1 might not be at the top, because we do have the last name of Tanabe, all right? But again, for the purposes of these directions, article number 1, 2, 3, and 4 refer to article number 1, 2, 3, and 4, not the way it's listed on the references page. That's very important to keep in mind, because if you use the references page, then they're going to be out of order and you're going to be giving the wrong information. So that's all you have to do for this. So there's 2 parts to your this assignment. The first part is a references page, and then really you don't have to do a separate page, but at the bottom list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then your parentheses for each one and whatever information comes in the middle. When you're doing this, I certainly recommend going back to the embedded citations part and looking for the information here. And you can always go to the APA guide, which has a few more specific details. Here they have some nice ones. You have the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, so there's a government agency, and it shows you how to write it on a references page. And then this part shows you how to write it for a parenthetical citation. So again, parenthetical citation means you just have your parentheses and the information in the middle. So this should get you through the actual skills assessment. For our paper, you have an article that you looked at, and here is our article. In this instance, it is an article. It's a magazine article. There is no DOI, and it will have a URL. So you would have to go and type in the Physicians Get Addicted To, type it into your search browser, see what comes up, and that would be the URL that you would be using for this. It's not in the database, so you definitely want to search it from the internet. And The Atlantic is a magazine, an online magazine. So you're going to use that particular information. Everything else is given. Here is the author's name, and here is the date of publication. The rest of the information you'll get by Googling it. The second thing that you're using for that second source is the actual TED Talk. And remember, you have to decide, is it YouTube or is it TED? look carefully. If you don't see YouTube anywhere, then it is directly from TED, and then you would use the information given on your in the references page or the APA guide. So that covers the APA skills assessment. It covers very briefly APA for you. We've also looked at what to the article and the TED Talk that you will be putting as a references page in your paper. Keep in mind, if you quote from these, you want to look for, again, the embedded citations or parenthetical citations. How would you actually cite these in your paper? The last thing I want to review is what we're doing for the rest of the week. So looking at the overview for week 2, you'll see what you should be completing. You want to start looking at some of the grammar topics, the pronouns PowerPoint, do some of the exercises, review the bias-free language PowerPoint. What you are submitting is today by tonight, or actually yesterday, Tuesday by 11:30. The initial discussion board was due, but I think almost everybody has done this. And the pretest quiz on pronouns, that was also due. That's very important that you do that because this is an online course. If you haven't submitted that quiz, you will be dropped from the course because this is the requirement of work that is needed. So if you plan on remaining in the course, make sure that you have done the pretest. Don't skip it. Even if you've talked about yourself on the discussion board, I do have to have an assignment completed and it has to be done by Tuesday, 11:30 p.m. The rest of the week, you're going to be working on your critical analysis planner. That is actually going to be under the submissions, and that is due on Thursday. So here's our week 2 submissions, and here is the critical analysis essay planner. You simply then go to the assignment. Some people have submitted their assignment already. Okay. Lastly, you then want to be working on your APA skills assessment. The actual skills assessment you will submit next week, and you can submit the skills assessment as many times as you need to. It has, in this case, it's all or nothing. So it's either all correct and you get full credit, or if you have mistakes, you'll get it back and you get to redo it. So you can do it as many times as you want. There is a final deadline, but I think it's still, you have a couple weeks to start doing it. So I would give it your best shot. Do this. Wait till next week to submit it, or I will actually put the submission link on for this week, so those of you that want to start submitting it this week can do so. In that case, you'll then always have to go then to week 2 because the submission link I can't move around, but I'll link it in week 3 so that you don't have to search for it. Okay. Remember, you're typing it up as a reference page, so it has to look like a references page. You can look at the sample paper to see what it should look like. And at the bottom of the references page, after you have your entries, your 5 articles, then you are going to list your parenthetical citations. And you can list them simply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the parentheses, and then put the information in there. So I hope this video was helpful. Hopefully it gave you a little bit of information on what you're doing for the APA skills assessment. You've seen where to look for some information on APA, both for the references page and the embedded citations. Clarified what you're doing for the rest of the week. And as always, if you have any questions and you signed up for Remind, then go ahead and text me. If you didn't sign up for Remind and you still have questions, then shoot me an email. Don't wait. It's okay to email me. It's okay to text me. I want to clarify all of your questions for you so that you know exactly what you're doing and have a pretty good idea on how to do it. If you are still struggling and you need a little bit of help and you can get on campus, you can always go to the Writing Center, or you can stop by my office. I would be happy to sit down with you and explain and show you everything in person as well. And if you can't do that, I can still meet with you virtually through Zoom. So you have lots of possibilities. The most important thing I want you to know is that I am here for you, even though it is an online course. I will try to help you whatever way I can. So if there are no questions, I hope you have a good week. I'll be looking forward to getting your planners on Thursday. Hopefully I will be able to finish all of my responses to the discussion board Tuesday and Wednesday. And I'll be looking over your pre-tests. Remember, the pre-tests don't count for anything other than it is a participation grade required for the course for attendance. So I'll say it again, if you haven't done it and you plan to remain in the course, please do so, because failure to have completed the pre-tests could result in you being withdrawn from the course. Have a good week.